Which is the great thing about delay pedals is you too can be a Tuvan throat singer or a Buddhist monk. It's the great equalizer for Gad, the delay pedal. Oh man, you ever have one of those days when you just can't seem to win? That seems to be one of these days for me. But, push through, and thanks for stopping by for a Rat's Nest review. It's really more of an overview. And again, just call it because of the rat's nest that forms on my desk when I do this kind of stuff. Or in my favorite configuration, when you get some ridiculous kind of inspiration and you find yourself sitting cross-leg on the floor, 25 or 624, and you just got the cables around you, and your legs have fallen asleep, and you've lost 3 hours to the trance of playing with your toys. Kind of one of my favorite parts of it, really. This is the Eventide Ultratap that I wanted to cover today. Kind of an interesting delay pedal, not your standard delay. It's a multi-tap delay, but they do make a plug-in version, but this is the physical version, the single box that they do, the more focused. And, for us people who maybe don't always want to be around the computer, which has been acting up all day anyway. Eventide quality, I think they do avionics too, don't they? But, a sturdy metal chassis. It is stereo in, stereo out. Interestingly enough, the stereo, I think because of the panel space requirements, is a single jack that's TRS, tip ring sleeve, aka, the stereo or balance type of connectors. And, because you can't do that normal thing where it's like left is mono, and if I do right, it'll split the two and it'll be in stereo. They put in a mono stereo switch. Now it's recessed, so you need a little stylus or probably a guitar pick or a, if that's what you use, or, a paper clip or whatever, a good long fingernail will probably get it. But it's recessed, which I think isn't a design flaw. That's, I think, important because, I think it'd be too easy to switch it otherwise, and then you're sitting around. It's a wise decision. And then you're wondering, you're spending 20 minutes trying to cable chase, figuring out why there's nothing coming through your right channel or something. And it turns out it was just that switch that was flipped. They're Eventide, so they realize we're not all guitar players. And there's a guitar level and line level switch, so you can properly set your levels to that. I am doing this through a mixer. And my apologies for the workflow. We're working on that. Beyond that, they do have a stereo out. They are standard tip sleeve, aka mono, unbalanced connections. So they're, easy to route, and then, you don't have to, no fuss, no muss there. One thing about the stereo, I will say though, is what is stereo to them? Well, the stereo imaging is essentially a ping pong, which is fine. It sounds great. But there isn't a dedicated control for the spread of that. There's a spread control. It doesn't have to do with the stereo separation and the panning. There's not a pan control, which, that radical of a ping pong can get a bit much. So, and I can totally see running this in mono, especially with some of the tools that it has. So that's a little, is what it is. That's the decision. You got to make some design decisions. Has an expression pedal port. It's nice because it's configurable. You can take a regular expression pedal. You can run the 3-button kind of option buttons. You can even run an expression with a single option button if it's the right kind of expression pedal. It'll even do MIDI. I think the MIDI is mainly for program changes. On board on the panel natively it handles 5. I think through MIDI it's 127 program locations. Memory is cheap these days. But that's just, it's a good feature, and it's very highly configurable. It does have a USB port. It's a USB B. I keep wanting to say P. It's USB B, so it's kind of that older asymmetrical style. And that looks like it's mainly for firmware updates and uploading, your patches if you want to kind of save those off, a backup kind of thing. It does have, there is a free application software, but it's not a deep programming software like source audio and maybe the TC tone print stuff if you go and you do the modifications. Which isn't necessarily a negative. The Eventide decided to put the your controls right here on the box, on the panel. And it's a dual level. You don't have menus, but there's a dual level first page and second page with black legending for your primary page, and then if you hit that, it's a shift button. You go to the secondary. Some of the source audio stuff does that, and so that's not an uncommon way of getting the double duty out of the panel. And again, in a compact situation, what are you going to do? The offset is nice. They offset that because just to give you some more room so you don't have to bump into stuff, which is real convenient. As far as the delay itself, now this isn't like other delays. This isn't trying to be the multi-delay modeler or multi-algorithm every delay. Where you've got this is a tape model of a tape, and this is the model of the analog delay, and this is the lo-fi digital or that kind of thing. This is its own delay pedal, and it starts off with just a straight ahead Eventide delay. Very clean, high quality, high fidelity delay, which, makes sense for this kind of application in terms of, let's start with a good, clean signal, and then we can modify it from there. It's a lot easier to take things off than to try to put them back in, so that's cool. I'm cool with that. As far as the sound, it's very... It is. It's just straight ahead. And here's, it's got the three basic controls that we're going to see in pretty much all the delays with the mix, the length, which is delay time, and feedback, or the number of echoes. So, with the mix control, we're going to get just that kind of straight ahead delay. Put some feedback to get multiple delays. And I like to use the cowbell and the voice. Because I like to hear myself talk. Well, I do like to hear myself talk. I guess you figured that out. But the other thing is, it's like, the cowbell gives you a real crisp sound, and you can really hear rhythmically and in time where things are, same use musically to really drive the time. But I like the voice because, our nervous system is used to hearing the human voice. So it's, even if it's not the most musically useful demonstration of the musical application, you can really hear what's happening to the tone, because we're so used to the voice. What's it, what's distortion actually distorting? What's it doing? Or, when I roll off these frequencies, where is that? If I'm EQing something. So that's where I think it's really nice. I can tell the difference between a tone like that, or a tone like this, or anywhere in between. How bright is it? So just a little aside. That's why I do that. So it's a straight ahead delay. Great. Okay. Well, what do we do with that? That's vanilla is the finest of the flavors. Sure. Okay, I got it. And who doesn't like Sailor Moon? Never actually seen Sailor Moon, believe it or not. But beyond that, it's a multi-tap delay. Now it's kind of I think kind of a crappy trick of fate that we hear about tap delays, the rhythmic tapping, a tap tempo delay. But the other kind of tap we're talking about is taps like faucets. Like I've got a big long water pipe, and I might have multiple taps, beer taps kind of thing. Like I might have multiple taps, multiple places to draw from that water line. And that's really more what we're talking about with Ultratap with multi-tap delay. It's not multi-tap tempo. It's it's a lot like it's a kind of actually the successor to tape delays with we have a record head, but then you have multiple playback heads. And the record head is essentially the input. We put it in there, and it spills some sound on the tape. And it takes the tape is the delay line itself, and it takes time for the tape to travel to the first playback head. And so it may be 1 second away, and you hear an echo from that. And then that same sound goes to the next tape head, which may be 1.5 seconds, travel time. And so you hear that delay, and then you hear a third delay at 3 seconds, or whatever it is. So you get distinct echoes from that one delay line. That's without a regeneration. That's without a feedback. So we would get 3 just delays. Like that. Instead of a single delay, we get, say, 3 or 4, or even more. And that's without the feedback, where a feedback loop is, kind of that same sound and time. Now, and so, with a tape delay, we tend to be a victim of the physical manifestation of it, in that the playback heads are not easily movable. I mean, the copycat echo did have the one sliding head, and that's how they set delay time, instead of trying to deal with the motor speed. And it has its own problems. But that it becomes mechanically difficult anyway. We don't have to worry about that with a, in the digital realm, we can actually pull that off and change where we want those heads, which to some extent the Ultratap does do, including the number of taps. It can go up to 64 taps, which would be pretty, for a tape machine, would be pretty unwieldy. Quite a few taps. Yep, quite a few taps. That's one delay cycle. So, that's what we're talking about with multiple taps. Well, why is that any different than, say, I'll just do my delay and put some feedback in there so I get a number of repeats? Why not just do that? Well, there's some, different practical applications. One, I think, is, a cannon in the box, like rounds, like Frere Jacques, right? Where you create the harmony by having one sound, stack harmonically on the next delayed sound. So if you wanted to, say, play an arpeggio, a broken chord, now, when I get those, if I try to do with just a feedback, well, I'll just use the feedback to get and a good mix to get the echoes to be as loud as the original, so that I do get that stacking effect, that Frere Jacques effect. It certainly works, but it leaves me with a lot of collateral mess from the rest of the stuff ringing out, and it can get kind of muddy sounding, and it's hard to stop, and it gets worse in the lower registers, I think. And then it's just continuing. Sure, I can try to cut it off, but if it's in the middle of a musical phrase and I'm moving things around, and I want that to happen. Well, that's a great place for the multitaps, because I could, for instance, okay, I'll drop the feedback all the way. Oh, okay, now I just got the one echo. Tell you what, but with extra taps, oh, okay, now I get extra repeats, but notice they stop dead, because there's no feedback loop. It hits the taps, and their job's done. Well, so, that's real helpful. If you notice, though, when I added the taps, when I had the single tap, that was the longest delay time, and I've added kind of intermediate subdivisions to that. So I may want to change the tempo, and that's actually, and you can even just change the tap tempo if you're doing it by tap tempo, the divisions, or if I want to do it by hand, just. So, you know, you can kind of get more of that kind of effect. And if you want to get them dead on, you can use a tap tempo or, you know, try to sync things all the way. But, you know, but you also, if you don't sync, you get kind of a richer kind of rhythmic experience out of it. So that's one way it can be used, you know, is to create those kinds of very defined rhythmic notes, and it keeps echoes from stepping on one another. You know, you can even use it on vocals where 7 years ago, our founding fathers did this, you know, and this part isn't, but notice that it ends very, very abruptly. So it's kind of a nice effect. Too abruptly, well, we can change that, so that's not a problem. So that's the basics of the idea of a tap. Well, the great thing is they add features to help modify that, so it isn't just that mechanical ding 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 ding, which can get a little bit annoying. That's why I did it, and I like to annoy you. I'm having a bad day. You can too. So we've got the number of taps, and we've got we've had the length, then we've got the number of taps. Well, now we can start adjusting things a little bit. The first thing we can adjust is, again, with the as we were talking about, the heads don't have to be set. So I could take, and that's what the spread control here does. We can have even spacing, spacing. Or I can use this control. If I turn it to counterclockwise, the taps will be closer together and then spread out. So they start really tight and then they get further and further apart. I'll put a bunch of taps in there to even make it more dramatic. I don't think the ping pong is doing it justice. So that's pretty radical, in that you can really get a, kind of a rhythmic spread there. And then it can go the other way too, where we're start out wide and then it gets more compressed. So that's more like kind of a falling marble effect, where the bounces get smaller. I remember that old Digitech, that first DSP 128, I think had an interesting delay that would do that. The delays would kind of, it was almost like a falling marble or coin, where it sort of bounces like that. So that's one way we can change it. And it doesn't have to be that dramatic. You can do it to get kind of a more, to get kind of just a rhythmic spread. Okay, so we can move the time around from even to not so even. Okay, we can do the same thing in the time domain. Or excuse me, the level domain. That's the time domain. The level, we can do a taper. Here's the taper control. And it starts out just keeping all the taps the same volume. Well, we can set, if we go clockwise, we get a downward taper, more like a natural echo. And if we get more taps, you'll hear it even more. even to fading away to really fading away to when we're that radical, we don't even hear all the taps. There, but this tap's still going. You just don't hear much of them. There they are. If I bring the knob up, you'll hear them. Okay. Anyway, that's to the right hand side. But I can also, because I'm not constrained by the physics, I can have them start low and go high, and kind of a reverse taper, sort of a backwards tape effect. Which I find really nice with faster delays, so that they kind of become more of one sonic event, and then instead of these big kind of grand echoes, so that they kind of grow up on you here. That kind of effect. Ooh, hey, that sounds like it could actually play some really cool cowbell licks, which isn't true. So that's the taper effect, and that's really useful. You can get them to naturally die away, or again, I think the reverse thing. That's what you get. And those are just both ways of creating variation. You can use both at the same time, just to give yourself some big echoes, but they stay controlled. And when I say controlled, they stay. They don't. You don't have to use these feedback loops and all these kinds of tricks. They're very defined, but they're big because you don't have them stacked on top of one another such that. They kind of disappear into one another. But those are the primary controls. Then we hit the shift button and we get the secondary controls. Now the first one on the mix control is just tone. And it sounds to me like a tilt EQ. If you go very far to the clockwise, you get, very head treble heavy, very trebly sounds. And on the other side, on the other side of things, you get very, excuse me. Look at me go. Whoa. So on this tone, it's very treble. And then as we turn it to the other side of things, it gets very dull. So you can get that kind of dull, just sort of normal woody sound. Guess I shouldn't just tap it. Guess I should tune it too, huh? So it's not the most glamorous effect, but it's really very super useful in terms of just, getting a controlled delay sound that is pleasant and doesn't just cram itself into your ear. Now, one thing to notice, you might have noticed there when I was playing with it, occasionally I would forget about the shift, and so I would be adjusting a parameter I didn't mean to. It's a hazard of that kind of system, I think. I think if you use it regularly all the time, you get used to it. This one I'll use for a couple of little, I found my little sweet spots, and that's where I like it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You may have other ones. But I think it's just something through use you would get used to. But it is a hazard at the beginning, or if it's not something you use regularly, it's like, if I, of course, if I had my druthers, they'd all one knob per parameter, but then you've got to, you lose your compact nature. And I want a car that goes 1,000,000 miles an hour and gets 500 mpg and costs $1. So what are you going to do? So we have the tone control, and that's giving us a tone. The next effect is a little more unusual. That's it's called slurm, and it's really a modulation on the delays, and they're talking about it. Just you kind of smoosh everything together, and it kind of makes for modulates things. So just like a regular modulated delay, it doesn't feel as mechanically just on the mark. Things kind of mush together, and it's almost like it's similar to, I'm not going to say architecturally, but aesthetically it's similar to almost a diffusion control on a reverb, where things just mush together more. So that's with zero slurm. That's with the maximum slurm. Or by voice, we've got no slurms. Then we get some slurms. Then we get a whole bunch of slurms. Oh, and you can see what it does. Oh. Without slurm, back down here. With mid slurm. Gets kind of dreamy in maxi slurm. Maxi slurm. No slurm. Half slurm. I'm half slurmed. Full slurm. So it mushes things up. You do, being mushy, you get a little less articulation. So, choose where to put it. But it doesn't, it doesn't really, I think they've tuned it well, and it doesn't really mush up the pitch too bad, or totally destroy things. When it diffuses, it does, I think, a very, very nice job. The next control they've got on there is, again, not a glamorous one, but a very useful one, a pre-delay. And if you're not familiar with pre-delay, sometimes you see it on comprehensive delays. You see it a lot on reverbs. It's that idea of when a sound goes out, especially in a large space, it takes a little bit of time for it to hit that first wall and for it to bounce the sound around. So you get this kind of dead, like in terms of reverb, a dead room, for a few milliseconds before it gets active and starts hitting things. Now, granted, sure, you do that. You can do that for simulation of natural environments, but that's not really what this pedal is doing. Where it's really effective is it gives your dry signal a chance to breathe and kind of speak and articulate itself, so the user hears it before a bunch of echoes roll on top of it, before a bunch of other sounds roll on top of it. So let's see if we can get kind of a sound where it's like, Yeah, I'm going to get a little more tone on it to get it. I'm going to get a little more brightness so that it gets in the way. Put a little heavier mix on it. And the length of the delays. Okay, we've got almost a pseudo reverb. I would say we have a pseudo reverb. Let's not go any further for copyright reasons. So we've got that sound, and it's great, but it can get in the way. The nice thing, especially when we start playing denser things, there I'm playing something pretty sparse. But again, if I go back to kind of a cello prelude kind of thing. Or something faster, maybe a, kind of a tremolo picking Carcassi thing. Well, it can get a little bit in the way, and that's where a pre-delay can actually come in handy. I can add a little pre-delay so that, here's without. Now if I add some pre-delay, hear how it comes in a little bit later. My original sound has a chance to breathe before the echoes kick in on it. Let's add a little bit more pre-delay, just about half. Let's give it a little more breathing room. Now maximum. Now that's quite a bit for even the pre-delay, because if you notice, it does mud out still. I have the pre-delay on it, and we still get mudded out. There's only so much pre-delay can do. It takes care of its little section. At that point, I would go, ooh, it's still pretty muddy, and maybe bring the feedback and the maybe the mix down a little bit. That may be a bit much, and I've kind of changed the character a little bit, but I think it kind of gives the example there. Well, I got to stop playing on the viol of the guitar of the leg, a guitar da gamba. My apologies for that. I am still just trying to get set up, so I'm sitting there playing the thing vertically. But anyway, so that's what the pre-delay does. That's a very common, utility effect. Again, that's one of those that's not particularly sexy, but it really does get the job done when you need it. So it's one of those things that's really nice to have. The next parameter we've got going on, I'm going to go ahead and bring that pre-delay down so it's not in the way. I mean, it's not affecting things. We can really hear the other stuff happening. Okay, we've got that stuff going on. Great. Well, the next thing is a chop effect, and it's basically it's a chopper, it's a slicer, it's essentially a tremolo on the input. And say you've got that atmospheric stuff. Well, you've lost a lot of the rhythmic kind of cues. So this allows you you can have it all the way off and nothing's happening with it. Or you can add the chop effect. So maybe I have something, And I've got my nice, well-behaved, sort of subtle slurm to that. I'm just creating a nice sort of well-behaved cloudy echo thing. Okay, that's what a... Ooh, folk music. Let's get a little bit of feedback on there. All right, so I've got that, and it's nice and diffuse and pretty, but but I've lost that kind of, rhythmic aggression. I can add that in with the chopper. You can hear that did. There, we get some real good chop. So it adds the a little more rhythmic effect in there. And let's maybe let's take some of the slurm off, and then I think we'll let it speak a little more. So we've got another effect there, and you can have a kind of a swell chop. Which is just kind of a swell on top of it. And then there's a triggered one too to kind of give you that can be pretty aggressive. So it's just another effect to add a little richness. Under the spread control, if you notice when I was working with the chop, I was working with that. It can control the speed of the LFOs for the chop, or the rise time for the swell, or the release time for the trigger. So you get those kind of effects. Now, it's coming off the input and it's feeding the delay engine. So with all the stuff going on in the delays, it's not that completely, unless you really kind of play with the settings, it's not that completely radical chop you would have on a dry signal. And that's not really its intent. Its intent, again, is to kind of mix things up on the delays to give you some more richness. As far as the next control, it's just the housekeeping control of the output level, which is a nice thing to have. That's a low output level, very high output level. Let's get rid of the chop there. Low output level. So it's that's just a housekeeping function to match things up, I find. I'm just checking it against the dry signal, kind of get things set up the way we want. So you can set all that up the way you want. And that's pretty much the controls to make things happen. The thing about the programming is, you've got the presets. I was just looking at, I wrote down some things I didn't want to forget. The presets, you can save the 5 presets. And that's, I'm not in love with the tap dancing system for doing that. It's in the manual. There's a little quick start guide as well with the saving the presets. Press and hold the tap button, you'll get a blinking ladder. Now, one thing I've noticed that they've done, which I don't particularly like, is that I don't think they delineate between the tap foot switch and the tap button enough, which I would prefer they do. And then you can do your preset with the active switch, or there's the holding. It isn't with the active switch. Yeah, the active button saves the presets. I don't like the system, I got to admit. But here's the thing: I don't like any of those systems. And I would prefer even just a dedicated save button. I realize that that's more hardware and things, but that's what I like. But it does work, and I'm not going to go into the details of that too much. I wish the other thing I wish they had a WYSIWYG. It's when you do the presets, you're not going to you're where these knobs aren't going to be where the settings are, and they do have kind of a neat thing in the setup menu, which you can get to, kind of one of those power off, hold some stuff down and power it on, and you can do some things. You can set it for when the control changes, it's instant. Versus, so there's your sound, you move that and abruptly it's over there. Or you can set it for catch up, where if the knob value is here, I have to cross that knob value before the knob starts taking effect. It's a compromise solution, and I think people get one way or the other. Used to one way or the other, but I like that they have the option. For whatever way. My apologies, I was just getting a message from my doctor. You can choose. So that's cool that you can choose which way you want to go. The expression pedal and programming is real easy, which I do like. It is the snapshot model where you move the expression pedal, as you noticed, it lit up the ladder here, the tree, and then as I manipulate the pedal, I get to see kind of its positioning, and it's one of those where I got one sound here, and I might want to move something. Let's move something very apparent. Let's move the delay time. Oh, that's the pre-delay. So you got to watch that. I do that all the time. But I tend to set things, especially because I do like that the second layer, it tends to be kind of changing the tonality, and then you come back and you've got those kind of big controls like the length and the mix. Because I do find I use it in a couple of modes. So say we got a big old delay time like that. Then I can go pedal forward and I can change things, and it's going to track all the changes. So I'm back here, and then I move it forward, and I make my changes, and it's tracking all of them. Let's change the taper because that's easy to hear in a big mix. And then we're back here for long stuff, and we move it forward. And we get that kind of reverby thing going on. We're back here, move it forward, reverby. So it is a very effective way of doing things, and it does get saved with the program. So I do like that. Here's the thing that I really like. I'm going to go ahead and get out of tap tempo, so it's on tap tempo. I'm going to get out of tap tempo. Then I get back to change the programs, select the program. I like that one. I like that one a lot. Test. Yeah, that one sounds pretty nice. Whoa, okay, sounds... but one thing I really like is, and this is, I think, I'm going to say completely unique, but it's unusual, is I can hold the active button down, and these are buttons, so I press that. Now it's in momentary mode, which I really like, because then it almost works like a sostenuto pedal on a piano, where I can say, make just some things case bypass, I can just hit it for a minute and then come back and do things. And whatever was down, when the Sustanato pedal was down, the sustain pedal, it's not that big damper pedal. It's the other one where on a piano where if you're playing anything that the key's down, you press that piano, the dampers come off of that, and you can continue playing regularly, but the dampers are off, so those still ring. Let me find, actually, let's go to another program. Test. Okay, that one will work probably pretty good, I bet. So we'll take that one. So, 7 years ago, our founding fathers created rock. Oh, we're back on. Fourscore and 7 years ago, our founding fathers created rock. And you can just sort of work with just whatever you're holding down, but then you can continue going on, and then you can always just add some more, and you just add that stuff. I just want to echo just one thing, continue going on. I can just want to echo just one thing and continue going on. Just that. 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 Yep, just that. And keep going on. So we can talk and talk and talk, and I can deal the important point and then keep moving on, and you'll hear the important point. I most definitely did not kill him, and uh-oh. So, that's an effect I really, really like. And, when you play with it, granted, it's not that functionally different from just having your tails on and hitting it active and then hitting it off, but it's a lot more, I think, intuitive if you're doing it, that kind of feeling where you just, you're doing kind of a Sustanato thing where you're, pedal down, pedal up, pedal, like a tap tempo, but that's the Eventide delay. So there's some things I like about it, some things I don't like about it. As you can see, I think the programming, it's deep, and so you really got to play with it and find your system. That's the thing. I'll find a couple of presets that I like, save them off, and then just use the. I tend to use the momentary pedal, and I'll just use it to accent some phrases. That wasn't a particularly good example, but I, trashed my presets. I find it good for that kind of thing, the Canon in the box kind of thing, Canon like a few, rounds. And I find it good for kind of quasi reverbs where you've got these big kind of reverby sounds, which is odd because it seems like it works to either side, those kind of like very dry delays and the very kind of atmospheric delays. And it doesn't do the middle of, of those middles kind of just traditional use delays as much. So I think it's kind of an adjunct pedal for that, where you may just use it for those outlying things and use a different pedal. I do like it for just kind of those slapback echoes, where I'm stacking things with the momentary. But the middle section, I think, is often handled by other pedals. So it's kind of a specialist, I think, in the field. I do find it, like I was saying, a little odd to program at times. It's not bad. You get used to it. And then the thing is, that's why I'm not very good at it. I find a couple of settings I really like, save them off, and just use those. Another type of sound designer might have a little better approach to it. But that's what I like about it. Anyway, well, thanks so much. I've come up on about 50 minutes of your time. But that's the Eventide Ultratap.